respected builders and respected rebels against the fake narratives. Listen very carefully, because what I am about to explain is being deliberately buried in plain sight. And once you see it, you will never unsee it again. Because this is not just breaking XRP news. This is the anatomy of control, the blueprint of accumulation. The quiet fingerprints of power moving behind the curtain while retail is distracted by red candles and noise. And today, we are going to explain XRP wallet distribution so simply that it will feel illegal. Because if the average person truly understood who is holding XRP, how it is being distributed, and why that distribution is tightening right now, it would cause absolute chaos across the crypto market. And yes, I am talking about movements that intersect with the SEC, the IMF, BlackRock, global liquidity desks, and legacy financial plumbing that most YouTubers are too scared or too ignorant to connect. And before we go any further, you need to do one thing right now. Tap the like button and subscribe, because the algorithm actively suppresses content like this. And this channel survives only if real XRP holders force it to be seen. And now, let me slow this down and make it dangerously clear. Wallet distribution is not just numbers on a screen. It is power mapping. It is who controls supply, who controls volatility, and who gets to decide when the price is allowed to move. And here's the part that should make your stomach drop. While mainstream crypto media screams that whales are dumping and XRP is weak, the data quietly shows that large strategic wallets are consolidating, mid-tier wallets are expanding, and dust wallets are being shaken out with surgical precision. And you have to ask yourself a brutal question. Why would institutions with infinite patience and insider access be increasing exposure during maximum fear? Why would wallets linked to long-term custody behavior be absorbing supply while retail panics? And why does this pattern look eerily similar to pre-expansion phases we have seen before? Major revaluations across traditional markets. This is not random. This is not organic chaos. This is engineered redistribution, where XRP is moving from emotional hands into disciplined hands, from noise traders into entities that think in years, not days. And when you understand that Ripple's entire strategy has always revolved around controlled liquidity, predictable supply, and regulatory compatibility, suddenly wallet distribution stops being boring and starts looking like a countdown clock. Because if XRP were truly dead, why would wallets holding millions of tokens be increasing in number instead of decreasing? Why would dormant addresses be waking up only to move into cold storage patterns? And why does this align so perfectly with global conversations about tokenized assets, cross-border settlement reform, and liquidity crises that the IMF itself has warned about? And here is the most uncomfortable truth of all. Most people will never position themselves correctly because they are staring at price instead of ownership structure. They are watching candles while the real game is happening in the ledger itself, and that is exactly why what comes next matters more than anything you have heard all week. Respected holders, now we step into the part where people start getting uncomfortable, because this is where numbers collide with authority and the fairy tales collapse. Because wallet distribution is not opinion, it is math. It is on-chain reality. And when you overlay that reality with who actually has the power to move markets, the implications become explosive, because the data shows that while the total number of XRP wallets continues to grow steadily, the most aggressive growth is happening in wallets holding large and mid-sized balances, and that alone should trigger alarm bells, because historically in every asset class, from equities to commodities to sovereign debt, that pattern only appears when informed capital is positioning early. And here is where it gets even more wild. When you examine wallet behavior instead of just balances, you see a clear divergence between speculative churn wallets and strategic custody wallets, the kind that barely move, the kind that accumulate slowly, the kind that do not react to price drops, and these wallets are increasing, not shrinking. At the same time, Ripple continues to lock and release escrow with machine-like discipline, creating a predictable supply environment that institutions crave. And ask yourself something uncomfortable. Do you really think entities connected to payment corridors, liquidity providers, and cross-border settlement experiments are making decisions based on YouTube thumbnails? Or are they operating with regulatory briefings, forward guidance, and direct dialogue with agencies like the SEC, the BIS, And yes, even IMF-aligned working groups, because this is the same playbook we saw in traditional finance when BlackRock quietly positioned before major ETF approvals, when banks accumulated exposure before policy shifts, and when insiders moved first while the public argued about narratives. And now XRP sits right in the middle of that same pattern, where wallet distribution is tightening while uncertainty is amplified. And this is where people scream manipulation without realizing that redistribution is how markets prepare for expansion. Weak hands are shaken out. Supply becomes more concentrated among actors who will not sell on minor volatility. And suddenly, liquidity becomes scarce at exactly the wrong moment for anyone still waiting for confirmation. And here is the part nobody wants to say out loud. If XRP were truly facing existential regulatory doom, you would see collapsing large wallet counts, accelerating outflows, and chaotic distribution. But instead, you see the opposite: controlled accumulation, rising strategic holders, and behavior that mirrors long-term positioning. And when you layer that with Ripple's ongoing integration into payment infrastructure discussions, central bank experimentation, and real-world asset tokenization pilots, the question stops being if something is coming and becomes when, because the data does not lie even when narratives do, and the authority behind this data is not influencers, it is the ledger itself, immutable, transparent, and brutally honest. And that is why understanding this stage of wallet distribution is like seeing the board before the pieces start moving fast. This is where the fear merchants panic, because once you understand the catalyst layer, the FUD loses its teeth completely. And this is the exact moment where narratives are weaponized to keep you blind, because every time XRP wallet distribution tightens like this, a catalyst is quietly forming in the background. And catalysts do not announce themselves on Twitter. They emerge through policy shifts, liquidity stress, and infrastructure readiness. And right now, all three are flashing simultaneously, because while influencers scream lawsuit, unlocks, and competition, the real catalyst is regulatory clarity by exhaustion, the slow grind where agencies like the SEC run out of angles, where courts force precedent, and where institutions finally get the green light to operate without headline risk. And you can already see it in how FUD is being recycled. Notice how nothing is actually new. It is the same recycled fear repackaged to shake late-stage holders, because if something genuinely catastrophic were about to happen, distribution would already be collapsing, not consolidating. And here is where the conspiracy becomes obvious. FUD always peaks right before catalysts, because uncertainty is the cheapest way to acquire supply. And XRP has been through more regulatory stress testing than almost any digital asset in existence, which paradoxically makes it safer for institutions, not riskier, because they know exactly where the legal landmines are. They know what has already been challenged, and they know what survived. And when you combine that with global liquidity pressure, rising cross-border payment costs, and central banks openly discussing tokenized settlement layers, the catalyst stops being hype and starts being necessity, because the world does not need another meme coin. It needs plumbing. It needs rails. It needs assets that can move value at scale without political friction. And this is where XRP wallet distribution becomes the defense against every FUD argument. Because why would wallets associated with long-term holding behavior increase exposure if the asset were about to be sidelined? Why would entities that think in cycles, not candles, be absorbing supply during maximum narrative negativity? And why does this align so cleanly with moments when the IMF, BIS, and global banking forums start openly acknowledging that existing systems are too slow, too expensive, and too fragmented? And here is the psychological trick. FUD tries to make you think you are early and wrong at the same time. But wallet distribution proves you are early and uncomfortable, which is exactly where you are supposed to be before a real catalyst ignites, because once the catalyst is obvious, the distribution phase is already over, and that is when regret replaces fear. This is where we talk price, and this is where people either lean in or shut down completely, because price justification is not about fantasy numbers. It is about supply dynamics, liquidity pressure, and timing. And when wallet distribution tightens the way XRPs is tightening now, price becomes less a question of if and more a question of violence, because constrained liquid supply combined with sudden demand does not move politely. It gaps, it shocks, it creates WTF moments that leave most people frozen. And here is the warning most will ignore. The longer XRP stays suppressed while distribution consolidates, the more explosive the repricing becomes when it finally breaks. Because you are not just repricing a token, you are repricing access to liquidity. And that is why institutions care. That is why payment corridors care. That is why entities linked to global capital flows care. And when people scoff at higher price targets without understanding wallet concentration, they reveal they have never studied how thin markets behave when large actors decide they need exposure fast. Because once the float is effectively locked by disciplined holders, price discovery becomes ruthless, not gradual. And this is where the final warning comes in. Most people think they will have time. They think confirmation will come first and price will follow, but history shows the opposite. Price moves first, narratives chase, and wallet distribution proves who was positioned before permission was given. And when XRP's price finally reflects its role rather than its reputation, there will be no calm entry, no friendly pullback, only disbelief. Disbelief that something everyone mocked moved so fast, disbelief that the signs were there the entire time, and disbelief that the ledger was telling the truth while headlines lied. And this is why understanding wallet distribution is not optional anymore. It is the difference between being early and being exit liquidity. Because once institutions, funds, or sovereign-aligned entities flip from accumulation to utilization, the market does not wait for retail comfort. It leaves it behind. And that moment is closer than most are psychologically prepared for. Respected holders who stayed to the end understand this clearly. You were never supposed to feel comfortable at this stage, because comfort is the signal that opportunity is already gone. And XRP wallet distribution is screaming a truth that most people will only understand in hindsight, that ownership is consolidating, that weak hands are being methodically removed, and that the asset is quietly migrating into the control of entities that do not speculate. They execute. And the final takeaway is brutally simple. Price is noise. Headlines are weapons, but the ledger is reality. And right now, that reality shows a market preparing, not collapsing. And when mainstream voices suddenly flip bullish, when banks, funds, and media outlets act shocked by price action they secretly expected, remember this moment. Remember that the clues were visible to anyone willing to look beyond fear. And this is your final call to action. If this breakdown changed how you see XRP, make sure you are subscribed, because when distribution turns into deployment, the window for calm analysis closes instantly, and the next videos will not be about explanation. They will be about aftermath. Because in markets like this, the biggest moves happen when most people are still arguing about whether anything is happening at all.